Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We're the last presentation before lunch, so get excited for that. Today we're talking about the Brookfield Place project, just a few blocks down the road, and how the project team there with Ellis Dawn and Brookfield as the client utilized technology to really streamline that handoff between construction and operations. It's often something that's not really prioritized, but it's something that's very important, and this team used a lot of technology to make that process more streamlined. Let me switch to the next slide. Here we go.
My name is Drew Woods. I'm with Ellis Dawn, assistant project manager on the project. I joined the project team in 2015 when the project was at level 5 and saw it through to construction, to completion of construction.
I'm Mike Simon. I'm the operations manager for Brookfield Place Calgary. I've been in the operations industry for approximately 20 years. I've been involved in a lot of projects throughout my career, from industrial all the way up to this latest tower. So I was brought onto the project in January of 2017. So I was there several months before we got to substantial completion, as Ellis Dawn handed that over to us to start running that building.
Yeah, and my name's Marielle Price. I run our construction team at Fieldwire, which is a construction management solution. And my background is in commercial construction in the San Francisco Bay Area. I studied civil engineering and worked in the field for several years before joining Fieldwire. The agenda today, so we're going to talk about the specifics of the project. It's a very unique project, tallest one in Western Canada, and run through the specifics of the building, as well as the technologies that the project team utilized, and what that really means, what you can take away to your projects to make that handoff more streamlined.
So a little bit about the project itself. I don't think this is the first presentation on Brookfield at the Canberra conference, but we'll try and make this one interesting. It's currently the tallest building in Western Canada, not for long. Edmonton has joined the race now. We're specifically going to talk about phase 1 today, which is the East Tower and half of the glass pavilion structure and plaza below. Concrete core with steel structure. We had a ACS system. We did about a floor a week. 6,000 people went through the orientation on the project, and our peak manpower was about 600 on site. There's lots of intricate details on the project. There's curved glass that's never been done before from around the world, Spain, China. There's 37 elevators on the project, the fastest of which travels 1,200 feet per minute. There are mechanical floors, 3, 57, 58, and 59, which were critical path on the project. The technologies that we use were essential to keeping the critical path on track. The project is LEED Gold, and I'll turn it over to Mike to tell you a little bit about the smart building.
So Ellis Dawn, as part of this project, did a fully integrated building system, or the IBS. A lot of typical towers are built with all of your different infrastructure siloed into their own dedicated networks. We've actually integrated that with a TCP/IP addressable system. So our communications infrastructure, our building automation, controls, access panels, security, and digital lighting is all on this IBS network. So we have the ability with this system to have them talk to each other. So if you've got, you walk into your room, the lighting sensor trips, it turns the lights on, but it can also turn on the HVAC and go to your assigned set points. We are able to expand that as well, so that if we get an alarm in a area, it'll actually turn all the lights on. So when our security staff goes to investigate, it allows them to walk into a brightly lit area, and there's no dark areas for them. So the other thing with the integrated system is that we're able to walk around with our tablets or our phones to be able to actually access all of the different building systems mobily, so that improves the operational time that we have when our guys go out in the field to address issues that come up like with HVAC calls.
This looks really similar to Raphael's slide from before. I just want to point that out. So obviously it's an issue that people know about.
Yeah, so typically in our industry, at the end of the day, construction general contractor will turn over to our operations and maintenance team a bunch of binders and drawings and files and just say, okay, we're done your building, here you go, have fun. So the operations manager and that team would have to sit down, go through the binders, go through the files, go through the drawings, see what the mechanical engineers had come up with as a design to operate and run the building. Thankfully, things have definitely improved. So we went from stacks of paper like this. CAD's been around for a very long time. PDFs have been around for a very long time. But technology has actually even improved, and Brookfield Place is a project that used that technology quite well. So what we've done is moved on to using a construction management software like Fieldwire to track changes, and the 3D BIM models that you guys have been talking about here today.
So what do we use at Brookfield? We use Fieldwire. Like mentioned, it's a software for field management. So through the course of construction, all of our superintendents, our field engineers, our project managers, project coordinators had access to this, as well as we had subcontractor buy-in. We had subs using the software as well. We used it to track our as-built as well as deficiencies through the course of construction. And guys had tablets and iPads in the field, quick and easy access to the most current information. We also use BIM from early on in the design stages of Brookfield Place. The designers put a lot of work into the 3D design of this project, and then throughout the course of construction, we carried that on. We had a dedicated BIM coordinator as part of our team, as well as, again, subcontractor buy-in to manage all of the changes in the model through the course of construction. And then to implement these tools, we had a virtual display in our office. We used it quite extensively, really. It was tough for some of our older superintendents, but there was lots of buy-in, and towards the end of the project, it was our key resource. We had people in the site office using this display for Fieldwire, for BIM, and pulling up all the information on there and just collaborating around that virtual display. And even then, after that, we used it as part of our training for the operations team. It came in handy as well.
Yeah, so once Ellis Don was finished with that virtual display, that actually was turned over to our operations team. So we have that in our operations control room where we still continue to use the Fieldwire and BIM. It allows us to have the guys look at these models and be able to jump right in and see what was built and strip away the layers. So the technology has definitely improved. You're not very often, hopefully going forward, more people will be able to take advantage of these technologies that you guys are developing to hand over to that operations team. It makes it a lot easier to take over the building.
So we really, we were discussing, as a group, and we really came to the conclusion that technology achieves kind of three key things. So first off, transparency. Everybody on the project team, whether it's foreman of a subcontractor to the client, like Mike, or any consultant involved with the project, everybody can see the latest and greatest information through technology and cloud-based systems. It also provides a single source of truth, time-stamped data. Having that entire history in one location is key. And then also just speed of access. Like Mike was saying, before you'd have to dig through those binders to find a certain piece of information. Just having that on your phone or computer really saves time and just accessing information as a kind of more simpler thing that technology improves. Something that I thought was pretty interesting is McKinsey did a study last year and found that technology best practices can improve productivity to about 15%, which is pretty incredible. So I think we're at a tipping point, and conferences like these, we're spreading the word, getting the best practices out there and sharing it across companies so that we can improve as an industry, and it's really exciting. So Mike and Drew are going to talk a little bit more about transparency, the single source of truth, and speed.
So with a construction management software like Fieldwire that was used by Ellis Don on this project, and allowing access to our operations team fairly early in the process. It allowed us to be able to jump in there, learn the software, understand what it could do. We were able to see what tasks were outstanding, what was assigned to the different sub-trades, see the changes that happened on the drawings throughout the life cycle of the construction. So from the initial IFC drawings that were archived all the way through all the CCNs and changes up to the final as-built drawings as we got to the substantial completion last year. So we were able to also use that to track and see checklists like the one shown on screen here, but also it allowed us to assign tasks or put pins in our drawings where there were any deficiency or warranty items that we needed Elliston to address before we ended that period.
Yeah, so to build on Mike's point, what you're looking at here is just an example of a task with a checklist for one of our O&M manuals. This one's for elevators, for example. So as many of you know, right at substantial completion turnover, you might not have all the documentation you need to close out the project, and then Mike will eventually need to run the building. So one of the ways we track this openly between our team and Mike's team was to create checklists and tasks for anything that was outstanding. So the advantage to that was Mike's team could go in at any point in time and see what was outstanding, keep us accountable for what was outstanding, and we had a record of what we still owed Mike's team down the road.
So yeah, so that leads us to the single source of truth. It took all of those points and put them together in a nice package that we were able to have as an app to walk around. So it was, Drew and his team were working on things. I'd be able to walk around the building with the Fieldwire app. I'd be able to find something, and before in the old days, you would find something, you'd call your general and say, hey, this is broke, or you guys missed this, or there's some fire stop missing here. I was able to actually use the app as I was walking around and find out, had that already task been assigned or pinned to the sprinkler contractor or to the electrician, without having to go back to Elliston and say, hey, you guys, you missed something here. So having that single point there was great. The other thing it does, it allows us to, like I said, drop those pins, assign them to a contractor or a vendor to complete it. Once you've assigned it, your email's attached to it, and then you get updates. So I send it off to Drew's team. He sends it off to his sub. They could take the picture, provide comments, say that it's done. Once they've completed the task, it didn't actually disappear. It would just go from open to completed, and would send an email back to us to say, okay, it's time to go back and verify. Was this task done to your satisfaction? Was this task done as per spec? Once we verified that those tasks were completed properly, we were able to close that task. It then disappears off of the drawing just to keep it clean, but it stays in a historical database that allows us to go back and see, how many times were they, was fire stopping missed, because all the fire stopping was tagged the same way. Thankfully on this project that we hadn't found a lot of that, so these guys did a really good job on that. But it's definitely that central location so that we're going through this warranty period to make sure everything is tracked and closed and completed properly, both to Elliston's satisfaction as well as to Brookfield's.
Yeah, it saved me a lot of phone calls, that's for sure. So just to build on Mike's point again, what you're looking at here is kind of a screenshot of, this is actually our ground floor here at Brookfield. It was advantageous for us to use Fieldwire to track changes along the way. That way, it wasn't such a daunting task at the end of the project to assemble and review and ensure that our as-builts were complete and up to date. It also allowed us to incorporate changes, RFIs, SIs, progressively as the project went. We didn't have to draw a line at a point in time. So the other thing, in addition to having your as-builts readily available, like Mike said, he could walk around, see that we've tagged something, avoid a phone call, know that we're on it, know that we're addressing it, know the status of it, where we're at, and any comments, pictures of the progress of that task throughout the course of the closeout. So this was a really handy tool to have out in the field, not only during construction, but during the closeout and deficiency management phase.
So like I said about the speed of how fast this technology works, so you find a task, you pin it, the software is smart enough that once you've assigned it, it will send that email out to allow immediate acknowledgement to your employees or to your contractors that they've received that. We're able to track it. As you can see, you're able to add photos, videos. You can point to what you're looking at, saying, no, you need to go and check this. And then once, like I said, everything is done, you get that email and feedback back to the requester to go out and do the verification. One of the other nice things is that if there is a change done, because it is done digitally and tracked digitally, we're able to print that out. And we did get paper copies of our binders and drawings, so this allows us to actually be able to just print out that one page and reinsert that into it to keep those paper ones up to date as well as the digital. But the digital future of these O&M manuals is definitely here and now, and this software has allowed us to be able to see that and just keep that updated in a very timely fashion. So some of our BIM models, we've got some examples here of the 3D modeling that the Ellis Dawn team had done for us. So we've got kind of our podium level boiler, crown and chiller plant. So we spent some time with Ellis Dawn prior to substantial completion. We did some training on the model mechanically with some of the ARPI's guys, as well as with some of the Ellis Dawn guys when we went over the full architectural. But this BIM model for us as an operator allows us to be able to strip through walls. A lot of times you come to a building, it's already built, it already exists. I don't know a lot of guys that spend time going back and reading all the original O&M manuals or looking at the original as-built drawings. So what we're using the BIM for now that it's been handed over to us is we're going to continue using this with our tenant improvements so that this model stays accurate and up to date through the life of Brookfield Place. One of the nice things that we're able to do is if in your boiler plant, for example, you've got a leak coming from one of your drain lines. In the old days, you'd have somebody on the floor above pouring water down a drain and somebody down below trying to find it, or the pipe goes through a wall and they're knocking on it with a hammer so you can try to hear like where does it pop out on the other side. With the BIM model and the accuracy that the Ellis Dawn team had done for us, we're able to actually strip those layers away and see within like relatively very small tolerances where that pipe actually goes through the wall, and we're able to sort and track stuff down really easy. The other thing we're able to do is if you want to look at just one system, we're able to isolate and hide everything. So if you want to look at just your chilled water system in your chiller plant, you can hide all the other stuff. You can hide the chillers, you can hide the pumps, you can hide the condenser, water piping, you can hide the floors, the walls, and just see how that piping schematic was laid out. Which is really unique because typically you have to look at a two-dimensional drawing and it doesn't show you those elevation changes. And where it comes in really handy is above a ceiling. A lot of you may have seen where you go up in there and you're hitting a bunch of pipes that aren't labeled, that are all black iron. You don't really know which one is what. This system allows us to actually be able to go through and identify that. So here's kind of an animation of our BIM model going through the wall in our boiler room up at the 57th floor. You're able to pan, move around, take a look at all the way the piping has been arranged. So you can see my steam tank for my steam boilers for the feed water. And if we wanted to, we could start stripping out those layers and just see like the feed water system for these boilers.
So really, this is changing how the handoff works, right? Traditionally, this is a point in time, right? Maybe you have a couple weeks where you're doing trainings and then you hand over the O&Ms and the as-builts and say, good luck operations team, go for it. And it really is kind of a point in time. Whereas technology is actually changing this into a period of time. It's a transition period so that everybody on the operations team can get as much, get up and running on the building just as much as the construction team. And really the traditional kind of handover point in time, it's actually more work, right? The operations team has to go back, see what the history was, call up the contractor, figure out why this got changed, what got moved, what the history is for this. So really it's more work for both sides as a handoff point rather than that full transition. Like Mike said, he came on 7 or 8 months before substantial completion. And he was able to get his team up and running on all that information so that everybody can hit the ground running. You know, both teams are working as partners side by side, and they have all the information to actually run the building efficiently, especially with all these really intricate systems that are at Brookfield Place. So it really changes that handoff, and I think it's going to be something we're going to see it more and more, just like contract types are changing. So anyways, it's kind of exciting to see those changes.
So what did we learn at Brookfield? Early meetings were essential to having a smooth transition. Mike came on early. We met to discuss expectations, what that turnover process was going to look like, what softwares we were going to use, what format they were going to be receiving documentation. Using the technology early, we got his team in. We gave them learning sessions on how to use the software, how we were using it for construction, and how they could implement it down the road as an operations team. And then just ensuring that technology is accessible to his entire team. I mean, I will say this project broke ground in 2013, which was 5 years ago. So the amount that technology can change in 5 years is truly astounding. And there were obviously learning lessons along the way in this process, but I think we've taken a lot of lessons learned between our team as a construction manager and Mike's team in operations, and how we can streamline this turnover process and make it a more collaborative and progressive approach to the entire process.
Yeah, and I think that one of the big things to remember is that if you can get your operations team involved well in advance of substantial completion, it makes that a lot smoother. I've worked on projects where the developer or the general has moved on to their next project, so trying to reach out to them, like Mariel said in the last slide, there's a point in time where it becomes more work because the contractor's focused on their next job, they've closed this one, and people could have scattered. In the case of Ellis Don, they're a large construction company, they could have scattered anywhere in the world, and Drew may not necessarily be readily available for me to ask questions to. So having those early meetings, having those expectations set as to what was going on. So like I alluded to earlier, when I showed up and I'd be walking around, what they had put in the Fieldwire allowed me to see what they were already on top of, so they didn't have to have a lot of questions coming back. But getting there a little bit early, we did find some things operationally that I felt could be added into the project. So I worked with our development team in Ellis Don, and we were able to effect some changes right at the very end to allow us to have an easier time operating certain aspects of the building. The technology from Fieldwire, thankfully, Ellis Don at the close of this project will be handing that over to us. Brookfield will be taking over that Fieldwire account, so all that historical data stays live and is now moved from a development construction software into an inspection and documentation software for us. So for example, our joint health and safety teams are able to walk around with Fieldwire, and if they find anything, so say a curb got missed that should have been painted, we're able to tag that and get our building services team to go out and paint that out and get it repaired so that tripping hazard is no longer there, as well as have that audit trail showing that it was done when it was found. So we're covering off our health and safety that way. Another thing that we're going to use Fieldwire for is for like ongoing or reoccurring repairs. A lot of us in Calgary that run these buildings, some of the skateboarders within the city have done a lot of damage to whether it's our granite, our stone, our wooden benches. If we're seeing an area where that repetitive damage is happening, we're able to go, okay, this has been flagged like 7 times in like one summer. Okay, what can we do to deter or detract so that we're not just spending money fixing, and maybe, I see it one time, maybe our property manager sees it another time, or tenant services manager, and if we're not communicating properly, it might go on and we might not realize how many times this repair has actually been done. But with Fieldwire, we're able to track that and see, okay, well, do we need to come up with a different solution instead of just repeating that same repair over and over again.
Great. Well, that was our presentation. We would love to open up to questions. Hopefully you saw some things that you can take back to your project that you're on or next project to make that handoff process more streamlined in general.
Thank you. So it's actually,
not a loaded question.
no, it's actually it's a good question. So when I joined in 2015, the project was not using Fieldwire yet, but I had been using Fieldwire on past projects, and I kind of saw there were technology was fighting the old school. Like we had guys like, I don't know if anyone knows Brad's story, but he's as old as the pyramids, and he was, you know, our superintendent, and everything was paper copy, and our concrete superintendent Tim Brock, you know, it needs to be on paper. This is how it needs to be marked up. This is the old school. And to be honest, from 2015 up until 2017, those guys started to slowly buy in and see the advantage of it. And by the end of it, we had, you know, our 65-year-old concrete superintendent putzing around on his iPad. So it wasn't easy, but we did get that buy-in from guys, and you know, it's kind of a new wave, and they're starting to see the advantages to using the technology. But yeah, we didn't start using it till 2015. Initially, there was a little bit of backlogging to do, catching everything up. But from 2015 all the way through to close up, it's been very, very helpful.
That's a great story. I'm an oil and gas person, so I wish that we could have it happen that way.
Yeah.
You know what UCMs and oil and gas. Great.
Good question, though. Thank you.
The kind of overlap between the handover to maintenance and from the construction side, who's kind of the driver of that method of doing, or that transition?
I think Brookfield overall, in partnering with Ellis Don, we partnered with them on a couple of projects. We've got a really great relationship with them. And I think it was just a natural progression when I got brought in and saw what they were using, and I had the backing of our general manager to make sure that this technology was passed along and handed over and then utilized by our team. So the development side definitely had bought in on the project before I had got there. This was well in place, and I know that they liked seeing those, you know, they had the ability from our VP out in Toronto to our local VP here in Calgary, had access into it. Once we got access into it, I was like, I'm not losing the software. So we made a decision that, you know, we're going to continue to use Fieldwire, because that historical data, like I said, I've got binders that were handed over to me that have all the CCNs in. I'm not going to spend time going through all those binders. I've got them in a hard copy, but I've also got them digitally. So when I'm in Fieldwire, I'm able to click and drill down and see exactly what those changes are. The other nice thing that Drew and his team did on the final as-built, so for like my boiler plant or my mechanical room, they've actually put the cut sheets are linked right onto my drawing, so I'm able to click that paper clip and be able to pop those O&M manuals up right there on space. So I think it was a really good collaboration between Brookfield and Ellis Don to make sure that the software got handed over to us, and there was really no pushback from either organization. We want to continue these relationships and continue to build amazing buildings.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Carlo with PCL. What was my question? So I was just wondering how you were able to verify the accuracy of the model that was turned over compared to what was actually installed on site. So like, I'm just maybe that's a question for the manager.
Like we said in the presentation, I got brought on 7 months before substantial completion. So a lot of the finishes were actually not up at that point. Ceilings had not been installed. Some of the block walls and stuff had been, but I was there for a lot of that final finished construction. So I personally was able to verify with what the Ellis Don team showed me in the model and be able to stand there and go, yeah, that's here. You know, is it bang on 100% in line? You know, there's probably a little bit of variance and tolerance, like an inch or two, but I know behind this wall is this line, and we were able to see in a void that was actually going to be cladded over. We were able to identify one of the changes I got was there were some drain lines that were going to be hidden. We were able to get cleanouts and stuff moved, and that piping changed from like a cast iron to a stainless steel, so that we know that Cast iron pipe has got a finite life, stainless steel's got a little bit longer one. We were able to get that change affected because the design and development team went, oh, we just need to run this drain. I came in and went, this is going to cause me a problem later. How am I going to gain access? So we were able to get that modified, and the drawings were updated, or the model was updated to reflect those changes that were made.
Yeah, two other quick things. Through the course of construction, we had a dedicated BIM coordinator, as I mentioned. So through the whole thing, any changes that came up along the way, we were making sure that we maintained that as-built model. We had some very, very large base building changes for tenant improvements, and we had to make sure that that would make it in the as-built, or the as-built BIM model would be drastically different. So that was a pretty key point. And then the other thing is our mechanical subcontractor, which affects a lot of his operational issues. They fabbed, and they spooled and fabbed based off their model, so it had to be accurate for it to work on site. So that was another thing. So definitely on the mechanical side of things, very close accuracy of the model.
Hey, I'm Bruce. I work for Maple Grinders. Just wondering, you got your model, you used it for fabrication. How were they in any way linked with Fieldwire? Or were they totally separate entities that you kind of had to update concurrently?
That's a good question. They are separate. And I think, you know, I've had a few conversations with this about guys, is our at the end of the day, our contract documents were still those two-dimensional drawings, right? So in that sense, they were separate documents, and when changes happened along the way, we had to make sure that the contract documents were being updated, and Fieldwire is what we used to track that. The BIM model, yes, it was separate, but we did a pretty good job of making sure that changes were reflected on both sides. If you've got an idea of how to change that, I'm all for it. Thanks.